Can everyone hear me? Okay. All right, I'm Patrick Mueller. If you couldn't tell from my shirt, I work at IBM in the U.S. in North Carolina, to be specific. And my presentation is on debugging Cordova apps, which includes Weinre, but there's some other tools which you should know about because Weinre has its set of issues, its set of gaps, and there's other tools available, and they actually also have gaps. But between all of the tools, you can pretty much get some pretty interesting information about what's going on in your app. You just may have to use a couple different tools. I'm sure this paper will be up on the PhoneGap site, but there's a link right now on my homepage, which is up here. So it should be fairly easy to find. Okay, so there's my, obligatory hamster picture, which I found out this morning. Hamsters are the theme. So, just as a send ahead, almost everything I'm talking about here is specific to WebKit. WebKit-based mobile browsers or browsing controls. That's starting to change. Like I just mentioned before, there's a commit in the queue to add some Windows Phone 7 support, so that's awesome. We've had a couple people ask about Firefox support. That was actually, I think I've last heard that maybe a year and a half ago. But with the boot to Gecko stuff, if there's somebody who would like to play with getting Weinre to work with that, I can definitely help somebody out, give some pointers. And actually, the Windows Phone 7 port should actually help with that because it's removing some of the WebKit isms from the core code. Okay, and before I start on some of the other tools, I thought and I don't have much information on this, there's a tool called JSBin, and I won't go to the link, it's a YouTube movie that's showing using Cordova with JSBin. JSBin is an existing tool out there. It's a hosted website, but there's also a download. And there's also something going on with Adobe Shadow, which is another mobile web tool. I don't believe Shadow today does anything with Cordova, although Bruce Bowman will correct me, I'm sure. So, okay. But I heard some rumor that that's going to happen someday, so I'm sure we'll see something. And actually, that's an interesting point too. Shadow, even though it doesn't support Cordova, it does support mobile web. And if you can build your app in such a way that you can at least test the UI, for instance, or some of the core built-in non-Cordova function just in a browser, you have a much wider set of tools available to you. So that may be another interesting avenue to go down. But one of the reasons I want to bring up JSBin is that's from Remy Sharp, and Remy is here. So if you have questions and you've played with JSBin, know what it is or not, ask Remy, and you can find him somewhere. I don't see him, but I know he's here. Okay, so Weinre is my tool, or the project I've been working on as part of the Cordova work. And the trick is I stole all the Web Inspector code from WebKit and then faked a back end running in the mobile browser so it thinks it's talking to like a real Web Inspector back end, which is implemented in WebKit normally with C++ code, but I faked it with JavaScript. And got a good bit of mileage with it. One thing it does not have, which is very painful, it doesn't have is JavaScript source debugging. So while there is a console and you can execute JavaScript code, you cannot set breakpoints and things like that. Can't do profiling, stuff like that. Probably will never be able to do that, but there's some hacks out there that could make it possible. And if somebody is into a lot of work, I can point you to where to go to try playing with that. You can run. The way Weinre works is you run an HTTP server and you have your browser connect to that by injecting adding a script element to your HTML, and then on your desktop, you go to the web page at the server. So you're running a server. There's a couple of hosted servers on the web, which you can find, but I kind of recommend people try to play with the one locally, because there's various things that can go wrong with the hosted versions, and having a version that can run locally ends up being a pretty nice thing to do. One of the things that we did last year was converted the Weinre server, which used to be in Java, to Node.js, and it's now on NPM, so you can NPM install it and go. So very, very simple, as long as you have Node installed. Okay, so another awesome tool is this thing called iWeb Inspector. And what happened was when iOS 5 came out, somebody discovered there was a non-public API to enable Web Inspector, the real Web Inspector, but only for the simulator. It doesn't work on devices. And it's a private API, so you can't ship it. But you can put it in your code for diagnostic purposes while you're developing. And I'll run a little sample through that. There are a few problems with it because Apple doesn't support this. This is just like something they left in. Was it an accident? Who knows, but it's there. The awesome thing about this is the JavaScript source debugging works. So if you really need source debugging for iOS 5, then this is the trick. If you have run this before or seen it before, there's a recent change because Safari 6, when Safari 6 came out, it actually broke the iWeb Inspector bit. But if you go to the iWeb Inspector page, there's some instructions on how to fix it, and how to fix it is you have to install a really old version of Chromium on your system. It has to do with WebSockets. More, which we haven't talked about, another horror show comes to the web world. But it's pretty cool. Then I'll show a demo of that. So then, I mentioned real Web Inspector because everyone's probably used, for desktop web development, Firebug, or now Web Inspector, Chrome DevTools. The first, and that stuff is baked into WebKit, but it hasn't been available on mobile devices. The first people to actually ship real remote Web Inspector was RIM, and it's on all their new devices, and it's been on there for probably 1.5 years or 2 years. Since was it the Playbook came out? I'm pretty sure I'm sure. Yeah, I think that's where I saw it, and it is awesome. If you ever get a chance to see a demo of it, it's really awesome. So that's the dream. That's where we'll be someday, and you'll never need to worry about what Weinre or iWeb Inspector, because you'll have the real thing. But until you have the real thing, here's some things you can use. So much thanks to RIM for paving the way for us with a real Web Inspector. Android now has some remote Web Inspector capability as well, but it's only for the Chrome browser. It's not on WebView, so you can't use it with Cordova, per se, but you can do, like I was saying before, if you can structure your app in such a way that you can do something with it to at least debug the non-Cordova parts of it or the UI, then you can still use this tool to help you. And there are Google people here, so you might want to bug them about real Web Inspector on Android for Cordova. And then for iOS, iOS 6 is rumored to have Web Inspector. Actually, I think they actually announced it. It was one of the little text things on all the new stuff. They said they were going to have it. All the discussion is currently hidden behind the NDA, CDA for iOS 6, but it's going to be out soon. There's a couple people who have written about it, and I assume are not in jail for leaking secrets or anything, but who knows really. So some of the stuff we do know is that it's only for iOS 6, and it requires Mountain Lion because it actually there's a tie-in between Safari and your iOS 6 experience. So you can only use this with Safari, and of course you need the latest Xcode, whatever that is. The other problem with it, and let's see if I can show this, that people might not like, is that because this is a Safari 6 thing, I guess it's Safari 6, Web Inspector has changed, like radically. I mean, it had the sort of same design going on 2-3 years, and Apple decided to completely change the way the UI looks. I think all the function is still there. In fact, there's probably just CSS changes, likely, but it looks different, and some people really hate it. I played with it a little bit. I don't really have a problem with it, but I think I would have wished they would have just left it alone, but whatever. That might be a little better. Okay, so but that's going to be cool when that's available. And again, so and that works with Cordova. That works with web UI web views. So that means you won't have to use Weinre or iWeb Inspector for your iOS debugging needs. Okay, demo time. So let's go here. I got a simulator running. I don't remember which app this is, because they're both the same. Let's do the iWeb Inspector one first. Let's see if I can maybe move this over. I don't have to show all of it if I can. Okay, so this is iWeb Inspector. I don't think I'm actually, oh yeah, it is, okay. I'm not sure if it's connected though, so let me start it over, start it fresh. And this is when you go to iWeb Inspector, you kind of start here. The iWeb Inspector, there's a couple different ways to enable it, including a separate app, which I'm not showing here, which does all this hookup for you. Or there's also a Cordova plugin that enables it and should be smart enough to not include the code to your production compile. So in theory, you can actually leave that plugin in your app when you ship, and the code's not there. But that was the landing page that we just saw there, kind of a not pretty page, but that's what you get. And then you have all the Web Inspector stuff that you know and love. So as I'm mousing over here, you can see stuff changing back there, and all the usual stuff with being able to change your CSS and disable it. So you can see that blue thing's changing back to its default green or whatever I had it set to. Very nice. And then it also includes a scripts panel, which Weinre, which I'll show you in a minute, does not have because we can't do anything with scripts, so took it out. But it's here, breakpoints work. And I'm not even sure if I knew this, and I'm not going to do a demo now, but it also supports even the profiling, which is pretty nice. But there are a few things that don't work, like the local storage and SQL database stuff is not there. But awesome tool. So that's iWeb Inspector, and then this is Weinre. So let's see if we can, oh no. Something changed recently, and let me run it this way, because it will kill the process, and then I can, there we go, okay. Yeah, something changed recently in Xcode, or probably the simulator, where it disconnects and loses touch for a little while. But so this is my Cordova app, and it just includes the Weinre script tag in it, which you want to take that out, by the way, before you ship. Some people do leave it in. That's this tag right here. And your first page, and this is a page that's not included in normal Web Inspector, but it's showing you targets, which are the devices you're debugging, and as well as the client, any of the clients that are connected to the same server. And for these hosted servers, there's a way to set user IDs and whatnot. But you get all the usual stuff in terms of element highlighting and debugging, CSS bits, so we can do all that same stuff. It's not perfect. Doesn't support media queries very well, which is actually hugely important for mobile, but we're looking into it. No scripts, but there are things like database support. We'll go through all here. You probably don't even realize there's a way to, you can just type in SQL statements in here. And that's just something that's provided by WebKit, and it works here as well. There's some amount of network support for XHRs to be able to track XHRs. There's a timeline thing that also pretty much only tracks XHRs and other things that we know about and they don't tell us about too much. So there's tends to not be a whole lot in there. And then finally, a console for you to do JavaScript interaction with. So that's Weinre. And there's a movie available. There's a couple movies actually. I think, yeah. And this link is just a search on YouTube for Weinre. I think the first one is Jonathan Stark's, one of Jonathan Stark's movies, and it's quite a good movie. Just 3 minutes long. Just shows you how to set it up and stuff like that. So one of the things that we've been trying to do is get folks to contribute. If people have ideas about the way they would like to debug their code, or if there are actual bugs people find, I would really encourage people to report bugs and request new features. And let's see if this is going to work. I think the network was kind of slow. The links on this page are right into the Apache Jira thing to create a new bug or request a new feature. Oh, and I'm not logged in. Yeah, so that's kind of the major pain point, and it's minor really, is that you have to have an account at Apache, which anybody can create to be able to create a new bug. But I recommend people do that. There's also, there's a link in here to like the Weinre homepage at Apache, which doesn't require you to log in. There's a Google group, for instance, which anybody can post questions to as well. And then, you know, some people have asked me, well, you know, what could I contribute? And anything. I mean, I've been living with this stuff now for a couple years, so I don't necessarily see all of the problems with it. But some people have mentioned doc. They'd like to have the doc updated. That'd be great if somebody can help out with that. That's easy to do. There's a long-standing request to change the way we do our polling XHR between the server and the target and the client, to use Socket.io, which is a little more responsive, and that would probably be useful. Listed Windows Phone 7 support, which I already mentioned, and the media query support also. Those are kind of some of the two ongoing hot issues, or whatever. Be happy to talk to people here on the Google group, in a bug, mailing lists, whatever. So if you want to help out, love to have you. And then here's some more information on Weinre. Again, that's that top link. It's kind of the home page for Weinre. It has links to everything current about Weinre. So that's where you kind of want to go. The little bit of information about iWeb Inspector is available on that page. And then I also have a link to the Cordova plugin that enables iWeb Inspector a little more easily. And I think that's it. And I actually saved time for questions. And if anybody wants a demo of it, because I didn't show a lot of doing stuff with Weinre, just find me and ask me. Question?
Yeah, so is there no way you can use Safari 5 and 6 without having two startup disks, or it's just basically impossible?
Safari 5 and 6 with what?
So you can debug in the different ways. You know, you're saying it works differently with like Mountain Lion, for instance, or you can use Lion with 6, for instance.
Okay, so
you can only downgrade to 5.
Yeah, so the oddities around Safari itself are that the iWeb Inspector thing, and actually I didn't mention his name. Max Furtman is the guy who he didn't actually find the hack, but he kind of capitalized on it and whipped up a little app to do it. The oddities with Safari are that iWeb Inspector used to work great with Safari 5. When Safari 6 came out, which is also the default on Mountain Lion, it didn't work with the iWeb Inspector stuff anymore. So if you're on Mountain Lion, you're just screwed. If you're not on Mountain Lion, but you upgraded Safari to 6, you're screwed. Unless you can go back, which I don't know how you do that.
But if you've got Mountain Lion, you can't.
If you're on Mountain Lion, you can't, right? So what we ended up doing, it ended up being a WebSocket issue because WebSockets changed protocol over the years, and we found a version of Chromium that works. And that's actually what I'm demoing on right now. That you'll notice that says, getting dizzy, Chromium up there and not Chrome. So I ran this whole demo on Chromium. It works fine, you know, as near as I can tell. So there is an answer for you. Now, for the real Web Inspector stuff for iOS 6, that is only, actually, you know, I don't know if that's Mountain Lion only or Safari 6. We just don't know yet. My assumption would be it's probably Mountain Lion. It will only work if you have Mountain Lion and iOS 6 and Xcode. You probably need all that stuff installed to use it. So it's a little wonky, but there are ways to do whatever you want to do for whatever version of OS you're using. You may have some constraints on which tools you're using, though.
Thanks.
We have a question here.
Hello. Well, actually, it's not a question. I just would like to point out 2 tips. You can get the built-in Web Inspector from Safari 6 within Lion, and you can get it live on your device. If people want to see it, I can demonstrate it. And the other thing is in Safari 6, you can get the original Web Inspector. You can, if you go to the development menu, you can get the other one if you don't like the new UI.
Really?
Yes.
Nice.
Thank God.
So that probably also means there's a command line defaults thing you can probably do. I'll have to look at that, because I was looking a little closely. I'm like, could they have done that with just CSS? And it's possible they could have. Yeah, but the CSS for Web Inspector, I think, is 6,000 to 7,000 lines of CSS in one file. You thought you had a hard problem debugging stuff. More questions?
Yeah. Could you elaborate a little bit on what needs to be done to get source debugging working from Weinre's perspective?
Okay, so the problem, the trick with Weinre is that it's just running plain old JavaScript code. And it's just using the introspection capabilities available in almost every browser. Unfortunately, one capability not provided in JavaScript APIs that we use in the browser are debugging APIs, right? There's no set breakpoint API or anything like that. So without having a special extension or something, there's nothing you could do. And it turns out even for WebKit, there's not even a way to add an extension to do this, right? This is really internal stuff. So people have attempted to do userland. That's why I call this is userland, because it's just running plain old JavaScript code. Do userland JavaScript source debugging. And it is possible. So the basic idea is that instead of running your normal JavaScript, you pre-process it and insert all kinds of crazy stuff. And then your debugger understands that it's running this crazy instrumented version of your JavaScript and gives you the ability to do breakpoints. There's a project out there called Aardwolf. I haven't even looked at it in a while to see if it's still alive or anything. But it was a demonstration of this capability. I just haven't added it to Weinre because it's a lot of work. It's not exactly clear the best way to do this pre-processing because it's an extra step you'd have to do. My hope had always been, oh, please let the platform providers give us real debuggers before people, you
Good
know,
luck.
get to the point where they need to do this user land source level debugging, and we're just about there. So hopefully we won't need to do that. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, kinda.
You can hit me up afterwards.
Thank you.
I think that's all the time we got for questions. One more? All right, one more. Right on.
I thought it was from you. I thought you were going to ask me. You don't have any questions?
So, thank you, Patrick.